Welcome, foolish mortals, to another episode of Megler Makes. I am your hostess, your ghost hostess, back with more ghost stories to tell while I make some spooky, cute art. Since I don't want to frighten you prematurely, a few notes about the content. These urban legends and ghost stories, by their nature, will contain depictions of death, both accidental and on purpose, natural and unnatural. Viewer discretion is advised. Now, as they say, look alive, and we'll begin our little tour. There's no turning back now. Our tour of Chicagoland continues with part 2 of the ghosts of Chicago's western suburbs. Just about every high school with an older school building has at least one ghost story attached to it. My own high school was said to have a prankish spirit that liked to turn the stage lights off in the auditorium if anyone was there working late. I never saw it happen personally, but that's always the way. Someone's brother's friend always swears up and down that some kid 20 years ago had an accident in the school, and from then on, weird shit happened. One school where there might be something to the rumor of weird shit happening is Bennett Academy, a Catholic high school in Lisle, Illinois. As tragic backstories go, Bennett Academy's history is rife with the makings of haunting activity. The building that now makes up the main building of Bennett Academy, St. Joseph Hall, was opened in 1910 as St. Joseph Bohemian Orphanage. As they did back in the day, any of the children who happened to pass away while in the care of the Benedictine monks at the orphanage found eternal rest, or unrest as some believe, in the small cemetery located on what is today the western edge of Bennett Academy's campus. As if there was any choice in the matter, the 23 graves in the little cemetery, most of them belonging to children, fuel most of the stories of hauntings. Dutifully following the best of haunting tropes, Bennett Academy's activity seems focused on the 4th floor of St. Joseph Hall. For decades, the 4th floor was closed off to students, making it ripe for speculation on what went on, or perhaps still goes on there. Looking at the building from the outside, with its imposing red brickwork and a row of white dormered windows that seems to stare back at you, it's not hard to see why so many people would believe the 4th floor was haunted. One of the most consistent and famous stories among Bennett's students is the story of Anna, an orphan girl who died of a mysterious illness in one of the former dormitories housed on the 4th floor. Numerous students have said they've seen a little girl standing in one of the 4th floor windows with a nun in black seeming to watch the students below. Anna is, apparently, a little girl who likes her privacy. In another Anna story dating back to before the 4th floor was renovated into classrooms and was still only used for storage, one of the monks asked 2 of the football players to assist with moving some things around. Not long after 3 of them got to what was once Anna's room, the closet door fell off its hinges, startling them all badly enough to send the teens running from the room, refusing to return. Anna isn't the only spirit to startle and frighten the students and visitors to Bennett Academy. The monks and teachers themselves have been known to lead tours for students, showing them supposedly haunted areas of the school with staged haunting activity to scare the kids. These practical jokes don't always go to plan, though. Once, one of the monks hosted a scary story night to entertain some of the students in the school's gym. The monk had asked a couple of his students to make unearthly noises in the gym, gradually increasing in intensity as the night went on. Though the weather outside was quiet, the students in the gym could hear the sound of wind rushing through the rafters, and a banging noise as if someone was running behind the bleachers and pounding on each wooden bench. The prank was so effective that the monk decided to end the event early. When he reached out to his accomplices to congratulate them on a job well done, they said they too had been frightened by the noises and left before the student group even arrived. The school has quieted down over the years, partly because the epicenter of activity, the fourth floor, was renovated into classrooms in the early 2010s and now has a much higher volume of traffic than it used to. But not all of the spirits have moved on. The new Fine Arts Department offices are said to be home to whispering and mumbling when no one else is around. Oddly enough, the building that now houses the Fine Arts Department is a new addition to the campus and didn't exist when all of the school's known haunting activities were said to have started. I guess I can't blame the ghosts for wanting to upgrade their digs. Bennett Academy is a private high school and not open to the general public. I'm sure the school would agree with me in kindly requesting that you do not visit them to get your spook on. The next stop on our tour is one you absolutely can visit, Robinson Woods Preserve. Also known as the Robinson Family Monument, this small forest preserve in Chicago is home to the family plot of, you guessed it, the Robinson family. Alexander Robinson, the family's patriarch, was a fur trader and farmer, as well as a chief of the indigenous American Ottawa tribe in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Being multilingual in Ottawa, Potawatomi, Ojibwe, or Chippewa, French, and English, Robinson was instrumental in negotiations and relations between early American settlers and the indigenous people throughout the northern Midwest. He helped evacuate survivors of the Fort Dearborn Massacre and served as a translator for the Native peoples during the negotiations for the Treaty of St. Louis. Later, as a Potawatomi chief, he helped negotiate several treaties with the United Nations of Ottawa, Chippewa, and Potawatomi and the U.S. government. He helped lead many indigenous Americans across the Mississippi River before finally settling in what is today western Cook County. For all of his aid and good deeds done for the early American government, Robinson got a rock. No, literally, the monument gifted to the Robinson family is a large red boulder, marking the place where his wife and several family members are buried. Just like all of America's dealings with its First Nation peoples, in an unsurprising yet somehow still disappointing move, Robinson himself was promised by the fledgling city of Chicago that he too would be interred on the plot, but the city later broke its promise and buried him elsewhere. Ain't that just the way? With the backstory of a lifetime of broken promises that ends with one final betrayal, it's easy to see why visitors to Robinson Woods might believe Alexander himself still wanders the ground he should rightfully be buried in. Events witnessed in Robinson Woods mostly focus on orbs of light drifting through the trees at a distance. Some have reported smelling flowers in the dead of winter. Others have said they experienced feelings of heaviness, like an unseen presence was near. One visitor, who admittedly may have been under the influence of a mind-altering substance at the time, reported seeing a figure of an angry man with glowing red eyes and hearing drums beating in the distance. When he told his friends that they needed to leave the woods as soon as possible, they couldn't find the path that would lead them out until it was almost daylight. That said, more people than just our inebriated friend have said they've heard drums and natives singing while visiting the woods. Perhaps the locals are justifiably restless after all. Robinson Woods Preserves is located at East River Road and Lawrence Avenue in Chicago, Illinois. It's open every day from dawn until dusk. As an interesting aside, it's about a mile away from the site of the former home of serial killer John Wayne Gacy. Though there doesn't appear to be a connection between the two, it's easy to believe that the two locations being so close to each other is more than just simple coincidence. Next, our meandering tour turns south to the town of Willow Springs, where we find a building that looks as though it was plucked from the verdant hills of the Emerald Isle itself. The Irish Legend is a pub and restaurant that holds a special place on the Chicago paranormal folklore scene. The story behind the Irish Legend predates the pub, going back to the 1800s when the Native American Trail, a small road used by fur traders to transport boats and goods between the Des Plaines River and the Chicago River, was expanded and later renamed to Archer Avenue. Not long after, the Illinois and Michigan Canal, known locally as the I&M Canal, was built, bringing in an influx of German, Italian, Polish, and Irish immigrants, all looking for work at Chicago's stockyards. As the villages and stockyards grew, the indigenous American lands along Archer Avenue, including sacred burial mounds, were destroyed to make way for urban sprawl. Along with the influx of new residents, the usual bad influences associated with heavy industry, bars, cheap hotels, illegal casinos, and brothels, sprang up to meet the needs of the tired, rough men who worked in the stockyards and factories. By the time Prohibition began, Willow Springs was already a fertile ground for the organized crime syndicate in Chicago. One of the most famous ghost stories of the Irish legend comes from this era. Then known as O'Henry's Roadhouse, the site was home to a speakeasy and hostelry where ladies employed in the world's oldest profession would often entertain clients. One such lady, the girlfriend of a gangster supposedly linked to Al Capone, had an affair with a bartender who worked in the speakeasy. When their affair was discovered, the gangster lured the barman into the basement of the building where he bludgeoned him to death. The gangster, who must have had more bludgeoning left in him, then went upstairs to find his girlfriend and beat her to death as well. The bodies, like so many in those days, were disposed of in the woods and canal via tunnels that ran from the building into the dark. These tunnels have since been demolished, but the old doorway leading into them stands in the Irish Legend's basement. It's this doorway that is said to be one of the bar's many non-natural hotspots. Guests have spotted shadowy figures standing in that doorway, and orbs have appeared in photos of it. Other areas of the basement, such as where the old boilers of the heating system once stood, and one of the other sealed-off tunnel entrances, emit negative vibes so disturbing that longtime members of the staff will refuse to enter these areas. In another story, another of the working girls was murdered, rolled up in a carpet, and left in one of the dining rooms to await disposal after dark. Her blood is said to have leaked from her improvised shroud and soaked into the floorboards, leaving a stain that is still visible to this day, no matter how much cleaning is done to the floor. The back stairs are also an area of activity. Visitors and investigators claim to hear the sounds of men fighting and women screaming coming from the kitchen and parking lot exit. In an area that once served as a parlor for the brothel, spectral figures of women in 1920s clothing have been seen. The upper floors of the building are also said to be riddled with cold spots, areas of dense, crushing air, and the feeling of being watched or that you're not alone. The Irish Legend has come a long way since its battle days as a speakeasy and house of ill repute, but not so far that the spirits aren't still lingering, still looking for a good time. You can visit the Irish Legend for a pint and a quaint old world vibes in Willow Springs, Illinois. They're open daily from 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. There may be some truth to the notion that Archer Avenue is the most haunted street in the world. Not only is it the street address for the aforementioned Irish Legend, but it's also home to a whole host of ghoulies, ghosties, and long-leggedy beasties said to have been seen there. Everything from banshees and werewolves to spectral monks and mobsters have been reported by travelers and visitors to the area. Even so, all of them are outranked by Chicago's most famous ghost, a vanishing hitchhiker named Resurrection Mary. Vanishing hitchhiker stories are kind of a dime a dozen. For centuries, long before automobiles, just about every town and highway has had a story about someone picking up a hitchhiker only to have the rider disappear suddenly without a trace. What makes Resurrection Mary so interesting is that she is traceable. Maybe. The story of Resurrection Mary is probably known, at least in part, to most of you. It varies depending on who's telling it, but my favorite version goes like this. In the late 1930s, a young gentleman had gone to the Willowbrook Ballroom, then known as the O. Henry Ballroom, in Willow Springs, Illinois, coincidentally, or perhaps not so coincidentally, located on Archer Avenue. There, he met a reserved but beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman named Mary. The two hit it off and danced the night away. When closing time came, the young man offered his new lady friend a lift home, which she gladly accepted. The new lovers drove off down Archer Avenue until they came upon Resurrection Cemetery, when Mary suddenly asked to be let out of the car so she could walk the rest of the way. It wasn't until the next day when the smitten young man realized Mary had left his car with his high school sweater slung around her shoulders. He drove back down Archer Avenue toward the house that Mary had pointed to the night before when she was getting out of the car. When he knocked on the door, an elderly woman, too old to have been Mary's mother, answered. He asked her about Mary, and the old woman gave him a pitying smile before inviting him in. There, on the fireplace mantel, were obviously old photographs of Mary, wearing the same white dress the young man had seen her in the night before. The elderly woman then told him that her daughter, Mary, had been killed in a hit-and-run accident leaving the O. Henry Ballroom several years before the young man had met her. Stunned and disbelieving, the young man thanked the elderly woman for her time and left. He found himself wandering into Resurrection Cemetery, where, to his surprise, he found his high school sweater, folded neatly on top of one of the tombstones. Sightings of the ghost that would become known as Resurrection Mary have been reported regularly throughout the decades, often with the details and locations of the story shifting around all over Chicago's South Side, but always ending at the gates of Resurrection Cemetery. Literally. One story has Mary burning her spectral handprints into the metal bars of the front gates before she vanished. Many have tried to link the story to one of the thousands of permanent residents of Resurrection Cemetery, but as with all ghost stories, they have met with little success. Still, 2 women buried there are promising candidates for the real-life identity of Chicago's most famous ghost. The first and most popular is a young woman named Mary Bergovie, who died in an automobile accident in downtown Chicago's Loop area in 1934. How the ghost made its way to hitchhike on Archer Avenue is a part of the mystery that has yet to be solved. The more promising second lead is a young woman named Anna Maria Norkus, who died in an auto accident on her way home from the O. Henry Ballroom in 1927. The story of Resurrection Mary continues to be a popular one retold in music and film. Sadly, in film depictions, Mary is almost always cast as a dangerous, vengeful spirit, probably due to the whole burning her handprints into the cemetery gates thing. A version of the story appeared in the pilot episode of the long-running cult-favorite TV show Supernatural, and she also appeared twice on Unsolved Mysteries, which is how, as a ghost, you know you truly made it. The Willowbrook Ballroom, sadly, is no more. The building burned to the ground in October of 2016. Like so many of our historic landmarks, condos and townhomes now stand where the likes of Frank Sinatra, Doris Day, Guy Lombardo, Glenn Miller, Chubby Checker, and the Village People all performed during their turn on the great wheel of history. Resurrection Cemetery is open to the public daily from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., though you won't find Mary's grave or the famous burned gates. Both the grave markers and the gates have been removed to protect the sanctity of the cemetery. If you intend to visit, please respect the privacy and peace of the living and the dead. I hope you've enjoyed part 2 of my stories of Chicagoland's haunted history. Next week, I'll be exploring a magical place closer to my new home in Central Florida. If you want to hear more stories of the not natural while I make stuff, subscribe to the channel and hit ye olde like button to let me know. As always, I hope you have a lovely evening, and thank you for spending part of it with me. Until next time, stay spooky.